right, we can go ahead and get started and review February 2026 meeting minutes.
Can I get you?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I was gonna look to see if there are copies in there somewhere. I know I looked at it before. Thanks. Alright, I see how it is.
It's a demerit.
I've got a lot of them.
Any discussion? There's Ken. Any discussion or motion?
I'll make a motion to accept.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
All right.
And opposed? No, okay. I don't have anything on the agenda for Prospect, Jackson Falls, Gray's Inn. Mike, have you discussed with Ellen?
Oh, yeah. So, well, I was just curious with Prospect Farm, because the snow's been so good elsewhere. I haven't been up to Prospect in a while to ski. Has anyone known? Is it parking and everything has been fine? Has anyone been up there?
Ken will have some insight.
Yeah. I normally I'm up there a couple times a week, and I just haven't gone at all this past 2 or 3 weeks.
I was up there a couple of weeks ago, in the parking lot, I carpooled with somebody, and it was fine.
Fine, usual.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
It was a couple of weeks ago anyway.
Yeah, I was just regular busyness, although we're just discussing if there have been any other parking issues at Prospect. If you're aware.
As far as Gray's Inn, I did connect with Ellen about it, and she felt like her staff felt like they could not take it on.
Okay.
And so I think the end result was that they would not do it. At least, they didn't. You kind of missed the window. I think that there's the opportunity to approach them again and we could walk it before the leaves come out and take a look. So sometime in the next month or two. Of course, you're not really seeing the soils, you're not really seeing the slopes that well, but we could walk it and either talk as a group, do we want to, I think we should maintain the view sheds, but whether it's something we want to take on and pay for and hire out, or if we want to wait and see, it would be at this point, they're not going to start doing trail work again until October, November. When would ski touring start doing trail work again, right? October, November?
That's typically when they do start, yeah.
Yeah. So, But the feedback from the staff was that maybe it was either too much or just they couldn't get to it, basically. But I do still think it's important. It's gotten a lot of heavy use. I see tons of people back there, and you know, if it doesn't take much to keep the view sheds open, I think it's a good idea. It gives it a bit of a destination.
So it was just more of a not sufficient staff this season that they weren't.
Yeah, it wasn't a no. That's something we wouldn't do. It was more of a, she approached the staff and said, "Could you fit this into your schedule?"
Okay.
And it sounded like it didn't work out.
Okay. Excellent. Nothing for community garden? No? Okay. Well, I guess we'll just jump down to wetlands and Eric. We received a letter from Chris Meyer outlining, he'd requested we read the letter out loud, but I have more questions on that, but I will enter the letter into our minutes, if that seems sufficient.
Can enter the letter, I wouldn't worry about reading it.
Yeah,
You know, it's not our fight.
yeah,
We
The fight-
would appreciate
excuse me,
being.
Our fight is with, or their fight is with DES of whether this permit holds
right,
ground, you know, with the change of ownership. We don't know any of that. So
right. Well, I
we've
yeah.
received the letter, and that's great.
Yeah, we did receive the letter. Our, I guess, jurisdiction doesn't extend to the snowmaking system or any in there. So the points that were raised in the letter about the history of snowmaking use, I guess the only question that we have, and this is following on another request that Chris had sent, was regarding in the January 22nd letter regarding no permit was issued for the wetland and water quality impacts observed, and Chris's letter refers to the snowmaking permit, but it does not refer to any of the wetlands or shoreline permit. In our June letter last year, that was a question that we had asked if a wetland scientist had been engaged and surveyed for the purpose of getting a wetlands and shoreland permit. And that was our only question going forward, I think.
Well, actually, I do have some additional information that I did pass on to the selectmen, and I think I passed on to everybody here in both the River Conservation District as well as the Conservation River Management Plan that was put together when the Wildcat was designated as a wildland scenic river, which includes Great Brook up until the bridge. And there are designated responsibilities when that CRMP was put together. The CRMP came out as part of the designation process. It essentially outlines administration and jurisdiction. It says the officials of the town of Jackson, the state of New Hampshire, White Mountain National Forest, and private landowners have a role in implementing the CRMP. Then it goes down, the town of Jackson has multiple responsibilities. The first is the Board of Selectmen holds the authority to enforce all local laws. Second, the Jackson Conservation Commission shall review and monitor activities, advise the selectmen in the state, which is our response, and the Forest Service based on that designation, on matters necessary to ensure compliance with the Act. And the town will review and recommend proposed projects that comply with the CRP, blah, blah, blah. The state of New Hampshire, in those documents, I believe everybody should have, they're online, anybody can access those. It says the state is responsible for enforcement of state laws and regulations in the river corridor. These include, but are not limited to, regulations involving fishing, hunting, water quality, water use, stream alteration, and bank stabilization. And then the it outlines the responsibilities of the Forest Service, particularly because part of the designated stretch is in the National Forest. Relative to water withdrawal issues, when the CRP was put together, it does state that the Wildcat River and Great Brook below Whitney's ponds are free of impoundments. Whitney Pond is used for swimming during the summer and a source of water for snowmaking at Black Mountain ski area during the early and midwinter. Some, emphasis on some, Great Brook water flows is diverted to refill Whitney's Pond during the winter months. My observation, and I think others' observation, is the bypass reach, which is actually the part that is designated, actually just has a trickle right now, so almost 100% of the flow is going through to Whitney's Pond, which was not understood when this was put together. And I should notice that this segment of Great Brook, which is the diverted stretch, is the part that's actually designated. The diversion to Whitney Pond is not the part that is designated. If you take a look at the town's river conservation ordinance, it also designates Great Brook up to and above at that point. So it is, and that river conservation plan was put together as part of the effort by the town to get the the federal government to recognize that the town was making good faith effort as well to achieve the designation that was obtained. I don't think there's any question that Black Mountain Community Corporation has the right to take water. However, and I did try to look up the permit this afternoon, but the DES website where you can access the permits is down, and there's a little notice that says a lot of times during the day that permit access is overflooded and you cannot access it, so I don't know what it says. But I would assume that the 1.728 gallons per day is permissible. However, there is a caveat. It isn't that you can draw that amount. It also has to take into consideration whether you're in drought, seasonal low flow conditions, that sufficient water is in the diverted, in the bypass reach, as well as sufficient water is also flowing downstream. That may or may not be the case, but that is essential to meet water quantity and water quality issues. So your permit gives you that amount of water, but it doesn't guarantee that you get that water if you're in a drought condition. So that needs to be demonstrated as to how that's being met. And those are just responsibilities we have as a town, both DES and the selectmen, to make sure those conditions are met. The other point I'd want to make is on sediment runoff. I think as you alluded to, Ben, we did have the complaint that came in on June 2nd relative to sediment runoff when the Whitney Pond was dredged. As a riparian landowner, and I do have a trail to walk my dog down there, we had a major drought through much of the summer, and then late September into October, November, we had a couple of normal rainstorms in the 1 to 2 inches. During those periods, I noticed when I was down along the river edge, because I go down there almost every day with my dog, the river would run pretty darn turbid. One day I actually did go up. I did drive up to just ask, and I did not see any sediment control measures around the whole base where all that construction was going. And when you got up to where the river came underneath where the road diverts off to Dundee, the river was pretty clear, so that there was all the appearance that adequate controls were not in place the second time, not the first time with Whitney's Pond. But typically if you're gonna do, and we as a commission frequently get calls to come in, and there's a lot of sediment runoff and inadequate controls out there. My observation is there was not sufficient, if any, sediment control measures in around the parking lot, around the basin, that when all of that construction was going, there was a lot of bare ground. And of those several rain events, which is finally I looked and said, this is crazy. Every time it rains, this river's running like the Mississippi. So there is a sediment control issue that needs to be addressed up there. So I would recommend, just based on our responsibility, because the commission was involved in getting the river designated, and the town does have the responsibility, if you take a look at the river ordinance, the town does have the responsibility in the river ordinance to make sure that water quality and water quantity is actually met in the river. And that's also a responsibility for New Hampshire DES to carry forward as well. Our job as the commission is to report those. We are not an enforcement agency. But those are the facts that we have out there as it currently stands right now. And I guess the best recommendations, because I think all of us want to see Black Mountain survive, I think at the same time, we also have a due diligence needs to report back to both DES and the commission as to what we would recommend the next steps be, because that's what our function is here. And I would recommend that when we respond to both the selectmen and DES and to Black Mountain Community Ski Area, that all Black Mountain Community Corporation be required to have an engineer-approved adequate silt control measurements in place, and the town check to make sure that they're enforcing and working, because this has occurred twice, not once, based on observations reported. And I should mention, at the selectmen meeting, the building inspector also said he received further complaints about silt runoff in the river, which is not, and typically with silt runoff, when you have a rain event, the silt runoff will happen during the event and a day or two after, and then there's the flows, because these flows tend to be pretty flashy. They come back down, and then the issue goes away because you're not washing off all the bare silt that's out there. And I think we've had a number of those issues up on the developments up of Malone Road, so on and so forth. The second is the diversion of water to Whitney's Pond should be designed and operated to prevent overtopping at the dam. Dams are overtopped, which has happened once. That's a great way to have it breached. If a dam is breached, you will not only have a big pulse of water going down, but you also typically carry many of the sediments that are in the bottom of the reservoir, which would just increase the problems downstream. Third, so that is that the town and DES should approve water diversions, but that water diversion should not reduce the flow in that so-called bypass reach now to a trickle. It should provide adequate water there for both the biota and aquatic organism passage. This is the reasons why towns are trying to remove culverts and replacing with bridges and so forth. But currently, right now, any organism, and there are native brook trout fish in the Great Brook, if they want to move up and down, and these fish will move sometimes 5, 10, 15 miles during the season, they should have adequate water that's going through that zone, because they cannot come up through the pond where the dam is currently. So any diversion structure that is approved should be designed to guarantee the sufficient flow, because that's the part that was actually designated, included that bypass reach. It is not up to the base of the dam, it's up to above that. And both the selectmen, but particularly DES, I think we should request that there's a better understanding when there's seasonal and drought variable water flow conditions, the amount of pond storage that's available, and snowmaking water withdrawal capacity, and the watershed size for inflow is matched against the need to provide still sufficient flows downstream for the aquatic biota and so forth. That's the goals of the CRP. It's also required in the River Conservation District zoning, and it's probably also required by the New Hampshire water quality and quantity standards, including when permits are given out for water withdrawal. I mean, I know that most water withdrawal permits, because I did serve, do not allow a riparian landowner to take all of the water. That meets both the riparian interest rights of all downstream uses, that they're also guaranteed those rights, and the public interest that sufficient water is available there during these conditions. So I think that's the response that we should put back. And I would open it to Eric. If I've got some of these facts incorrect, I'd appreciate it. Most of these plans and the town ordinances are all online, but that's my recommendation, if we're going to continue to meet our responsibilities.
As we design a response, should we be talking to DES, the Forest Service? Should we just do it on our own and let them?
No, I believe, Dick, that our obligations would be to, I mean, DES CC'd us on their January letter, so this would be our response back to them. We do have the March 2nd letter from Eric's lawyer. They obviously we'd be obligated to provide them with you know, our opinions as to what we're seeing, what we're reporting,
Mm,
and we should provide it to the selectmen and anybody else that was CC'd in the January 22nd.
Well, it should definitely go to the selectmen because
Yeah.
they're the enforcement for all of this. I mean, we can make our recommendations, but
That is correct.
they have to.
But having been involved in the whole designation, you probably around, and many of you probably, I think you were as well, but, I mean, the selectmen sort of said that's not a responsibility. I did have to remind them if they read the zoning regulations, it is part of their responsibility in the river ordinance, yes.
Except we predate zoning,
Pardon me?
except that we predate all zoning in the town of Jackson. So,
And I'm not disagreeing, but I don't believe that you have the right to suck the river dry either.
well, let me know when I can,
Yeah.
we can go through it.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Well,
perfect.
hold on.
Okay.
No,
I mean, Pam, do you have anything to add to what Ken said?
I was just curious as to what the effect of the sedimentation was doing.
Typically, it's a problem for any organisms that live there, fish that gets in their gills, a lot of the food base that's there, eucalyptus, flies, those types of things. That's why the state has erosion control and sediment.
Thanks.
Jeff?
Digesting,
Okay.
sorting it out in my brain.
Eric?
thank you. By the way, I don't know everyone, so, and there's no name tags like the select board, so I apologize. First and foremost, I think we were fairly, specific about wanting that letter read into the record if possible. I think it is important for communication for the town. This is really the avenue to have that response come in, right? And so I do think it's important. I think it's a pretty important letter. I'm happy to read it, or the board could read it, or just object to reading it in general. But either way, I'd like a decision there.
We will, has everyone reviewed the letter?
Yeah, I read it earlier.
I read it earlier.
But again, my point isn't for you guys to read it, it's for, people that may want to watch the video and go down the whole thing, because we can't send a letter to everyone in town. This is the venue of the conservation,
We will certainly include it in the meeting minutes.
Then what I would suggest, since we just received that today, is we let Eric read it in the meeting minutes. Is that?
Yeah, that's fine. So
Let's do that.
So I can read it right now.
Yeah.
Okay, very quickly. Okay, so, letter from Ricardo Krant, Black Mountain Community Corporation. Dear Conservation Committee, this office represents the Black Mountain Community Corporation, the owner of Black Mountain Ski Area. It has come to our attention that you discussed correspondence from NHDES regarding Whitney's Pond at your February 2nd meeting, and intend to do so again in your March 2nd meeting, which is where we are today. This letter is to correct the apparent errors of fact in the NHDES letter, which were repeated at your last meeting in the hopes of stopping the repetition of incorrect information. We ask you to read this aloud at your meeting and enter to the record. First, to the extent that NHDES represented that it quote-unquote had no record that a permit was issued, we met with NHDES on site on February 24th and provided them about the existing pond permit 20410, which Black Mountain has had held for decades and allows the withdrawal of 1,728 gallons per day from Whitney's Pond and the diversion from Great Brook for snowmaking purposes. While DES was currently unaware of this permit, we were able to provide it with them as this permit record are held by the town of Jackson. Second, DES indicated us on the February 24th meeting that upon their inspection of Great Brook in December of 2025, there was no sediment or water quality issue with Great Brook. In fact, we were able to show DES representative's picture of the brook from 2015 that also shows the large rocks in place a decade ago. To provide a broader history, Black Mountain's use of Whitney Pond and the Great Brook diversion on private property now owned by Whitney's Inn goes back at least to the 1950s. It's like 1956 actually was the original. There's a diversion dam structure in Great Brook to provide water for Whitney's Pond for snowmaking, which was destroyed by a large flood event in the 1960s. Since that time, Black Mountain has used sandbags in Great Brook to effect diversion of water into the diversion channel and Whitney's Pond during snowmaking season. In 2013, DES decided it did not like the historic use of sandbags in Great Brook and included a letter of deficiency. After Black Mountain designed a proposed replacement diversion dam in 2015, according to project engineer Burr Phillips, Governor Chris Sununu directed DES to withdraw its letter of deficiency, and the practice of sandbag diversion was continued. It is Black Mountain's position that its diversion for snowmaking predates the jurisdictional authority of DES and any authority of the town, whether zoning or otherwise. Moreover, there's no easement on record that would submit this privately owned portion of Great Brook that would affect its historical use. In fact, the historical use is recognized by the Wildcat River Comprehensive River Management Plan in 2005 at page 41. The historic diversion of water from Great Brook is essential to the operation of Black Mountain, and Black Mountain cannot take any action that would affect this historic use or its permitted right to draw up to 1.728 million gallons per day from the brook for snowmaking purposes. However, Black Mountain does believe a replacement diversion dam to replace the one destroyed in the 1960s would benefit all parties to the extent it can be done without affecting Black Mountain's historic and grandfathered rights. Accordingly, Black Mountain is investigating the feasibility of a replacement diversion dam in consultation with DES and Black Mountain's own engineer and wetlands contractor, similar to the project design in 2015. We understand that DES will keep you and the select board up to date on the possible project and encourage the commission to support this effort. Thanks for your review of this letter and correcting the record, and please let me know if you have any questions. So that is the letter. The next piece that I want to talk about here is we really do have two issues, right? We have a sediment issue, or a perceived issue, and then we have a snowmaking water withdrawal issue. So I'll start with the snowmaking water withdrawal issue, right? Again, we believe that this predates DES, period, and it predates zoning. And I take issue with your comment, Ken, about sucking the river dry, because we do not believe that. It's not, we don't have to have the forum now to argue about it, but I definitely, I think that those are not factual statements, those are.
That was not the statement that I made, Eric.
Oh, okay.
My statement was, I don't believe your permit allows you to suck the river dry.
Yes, okay, so
That's
you don't believe that we're sucking the river dry?
I never said that.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm just trying to, like,
No.
why would you say our permit doesn't allow us
I've
to
never
suck
seen the river behind my house totally dry, so I've never said that.
And then and I do want just a little bit, I just do want a little bit of clarity too, because the water does not go through the diversion into the snowmaking pond and disappear, right? It goes 99% of the time, it goes right back into the river, right? Because it only skips that very small section of the river. There's actually a couple ways that it gets there. There is a dam sluice type structure at the end, and then there's also a drain in the pond itself. And then any excess water that comes from our snowmaking, there's a separate return line that comes near the lift line lodge and dumps back into the river there as well. So I think it's important, as this is a public body that a lot of people listen to, that when we say statements like, our permit does not allow us to suck the river dry, you know, that's something that we disagree with you on that.
And we will ask DES to clarify that case.
Yes, absolutely, and I think we should ask DES for that. The amount of water, that 1.7 gallons, really generally that's not going to do what you're talking about. Like I've only been here for a season and a half and looked at it, but our snowmaking comes out, it's stored on the hill, it comes right back into the same watershed. There's an industry accepted practice of less than 1% evaporation that gets rid of that water. And when we're making snow, and the way our withdrawal works in the return, there isn't a massive effect to the flow of the river. Most of the water that we use is stored in the pond. It's not like we're taking it right out of the river. The pond is essentially storing the water for us. It's more of refilling that pond once we're done with snowmaking or where things go there. So, and the pond does refill quite quickly. So I think it's very important to understand that we are not sucking the water out of the river. We are taking the water out of the Whitney's fire pond, right? And then that water is replaced from the brook, right? So I think, you know, there obviously there was a diversion structure that was destroyed in the 60s. And it is very, very clear that sandbags have been, a historical use. And obviously, Governor Sununu pulled, the requirement to put that diversion structure in. As we talked with DES on site, sandbags are not a scientific tool. And it's very difficult to say, okay, do we place one sort of here? Do we place one sort of here? The conversation with DES was like, they actually want us to put some sandbags back to go ahead and divert more water down when we're not using it. And so I think that there's a lot of...
Can you clarify that real quick?
Hmm.
To put sandbags into the diversion structure or into the Great Brook?
Well, in right where they meet, like right,
To restrict the flow into the pond.
they said that we could do that. Like if we had a large rain event coming and we were concerned about the dam having issues or something like that, we could go ahead and basically, put that there. As I had shown, and I do want to show this to you guys. I have a photo here that I think is very, very valuable. But they're just not scientific things. A lot of times we'll put a sandbag in there, you get a little bit of rain and it washes them right out, and away it goes. So I in general, I disagree that we are doing anything that is different than the historical use. Are we certainly marketing our snowmaking more? Sure, but I just cannot see or follow that comment of how we're taking too much or we're diverting in a way that we're not supposed to. And that, I believe, ultimately will be the conclusion of DES as well, and I believe they are 90% of the way there already. Before I move on to the next one, I don't know if we want to just discuss the snowmaking withdrawal. I understand in general your concern is you think we're taking too much water, but you're not sure.
I don't think the
I don't think that's
commission
what I
has-
said, Eric, so I want to be careful.
Yeah, well, so then I guess what is the concern? What is the problem that you're trying to solve with that? Like, do you think we're taking too much water? Do you think we're not?
Typically when water, do you want me to answer the question? Because
Yeah.
I'd be happy to. I mean, typically, with water withdrawals, you still have to demonstrate that sufficient water is being provided for downstream riparian interest, right? Riparian right interest in eastern water law has been around well before Black Mountain even existed. And water withdrawal permits, because I did sit on the state's rivers committee for many years, typically require that when water is being withdrawn, if there's a drought or whatever, you have to share the resource. One entity does not get all of the water. The comment that I made is that's your permit. I don't doubt that you have a permit. I don't disagree that you have rights to the water there, and you should have rights to the water as any riparian owner. What I had recommended here is at least be demonstrated to us that sufficient flows are met in the bypass reach and the downstream while water is being withdrawn. That's not an unreasonable request.
I would agree.
And that's all we would be asking from DES, is to demonstrate that when water withdrawals are happening, up to your maximum amount allotted, that those conditions are happening. I'm not accusing anybody, but I do know that the bypass reach right now has got about a trickle when I went up and looked at it last February 20th. And that is the part that was designated into the Wildcat Scenic Designation. And it does recognize that, and that designation recognized water withdrawal rights that existed prematurely, and that was one of the purposes of the fire pond. I don't think there's any question on that. The question is whether sufficient water, whether it can be demonstrated that with water withdrawals happening in the diversion, that there's still sufficient water. There is definitely not sufficient water in the bypass currently.
That is in your opinion.
I'm an aquatic ecologist with a PhD in that area.
I think,
I'm
and
not
I
a
appreciate
tool.
that, but I mean, it is.
A lot of this is just opinion.
Yeah.
A lot of what you're saying is
Yeah.
opinion also.
Absolutely. So it really does come down to DES, right?
Right,
That's why we have that.
that's where the fight is.
So,
I mean, it was observed that it's a trickle. That's not sufficient water for aquatic. And the flow that was going through the pond was pretty high.
Again, we don't believe that we've done anything that is different than what has historically been done. And DES and Black Mountain Community Corporation are working on how to manage which way water goes. And right now we're dealing with sandbags. And ideally, we would have something better than sandbags. And you know, that's where we're looking at. But this is not, you know, there was in the DES letter, there was a accusation of, you know, having some sort of construction project that unduly diverted all this water in a way that hadn't been done before. And as we said in our letter, like, we were able to show that the rocks are in the same place from 2015, right? Any work that has been done has been in our diversion channel to clean that out and to make stuff happen. So Black Mountain does not want to go into Great Brook and start messing around there. Like, we want before we take different action, we want extreme clarity. You know, we're certainly allowed to dredge and work on our diversion and do those things, you know, like we've always done. You know, and to that matter, I do very briefly want to show you this. This was taken, I think they came out the 23rd or the 24th of December this year, I think was the inspection date from the letter. This is taken on December 19th, so just 4 or 5 days before. You know, and to give you the idea of, like, when we get a water event here, you can see the water obviously is, you know, it's going all the way around this diversion. So these are the big rocks somewhat in question here. Here's the diversion channel. Here's the main Great Brook, right? We could put sandbags there all day long and take 100% of the water and divert it down the brook, right, if we weren't using it. Because obviously we're not making snow in these conditions,
Right.
because it's just too warm. But it literally destroys the entire thing. You know, you see the diversion here. This culvert is full. A lot of times when we're done after a water event, I mean, take a look at this photo, right? There's whole trees in our diversion dam, and it's full of ice, and it requires a remarkable amount of maintenance to keep it going. So this is a very complex problem, and what we just want to make sure is that when we're maintaining this channel, that we're not doing things out there. And sandbags is not going to solve that. So whether we divert, my point, I guess, ultimately, to try to sum it up on the diversion, right? We have very little control over what water goes where by using sandbags. So whether we need to divert less, or we need to divert more, or we need to divert from this channel to this channel, right? We're not going to go out in the middle of Great Brook with an excavator and start diverting water. We're just not going to do that. And so when we clean out this channel, sometimes more water comes this way. But that's our channel to clean out, right? It has a place to go.
I don't think the issue is the issue that you're talking about, though. The question is whether sufficient water is going down through the bypass region. If you have a mechanism to have that happen, then you're meeting what the river was designated.
But what I don't, though, I don't really have a mechanism to control the water, is what I'm telling you. Like, I don't have a great mechanism. The only thing I can control, right, is really being able to pump that 1.7 million gallons, because I have a switch on the pump that I can turn on and off. But I think there's just a little bit of a confusion around how much control we have about whether the water goes left or right. And the only thing I can do is keep our diversion channel open, and so that when we do need the water, it has a place to go.
But if I understand, I'm not going to further debate this.
Yeah.
What you're saying is you don't have the ability to provide more than a trickle flow into Great Brook.
I don't have the ability to control where that water goes very well.
That wasn't the question asked.
Yeah, I mean, I could attempt to dam up our thing, and our spillway. I could attempt to dam up our spillway with sandbags, but we see what that does. I mean, it sometimes they last a day or two. And, you know, and the flow of that water into the pond is also very important from a fire pond standpoint, right? And when it gets very cold, and if you were, let's say, for example, you were to totally cut off the water in the winter, the pond would not be you couldn't get water out of it for snowmaking and fire suppression, because it would freeze over. There would be no flow. You need flow in that pond in order to be able to withdraw water. So we can't cut it off. I just don't have a lot of control over it, Ken.
But in the winter, that's not a fire pond, it's not a functional fire pond, there's no dry hydrant, and it is not plowed so that you could get a truck down there, and that was brought up at the selectmen's meeting.
And which I disagreed with that assessment. It is quite often plowed. There may be, when we say the winter, there, and granted, I understand we're in an exceptional snow year. When we are actively making snow from November all the way through, we do plow it, we do bring equipment down there. We do have stuff on site, like we've replaced pumps in the middle of the winter, so it is accessible. And it is a very important water source for that lodge and Whitney's and everything else. So I, especially speaking with Jay Henry, like we could get water out of that pond if we needed to. And long term, I think we do need it. I do think we need a dry hydrant there, for sure. That would make me feel a lot more comfortable.
I mean, I'm not an expert on that part,
Yeah.
I'm just going with what was said at the selectmen's meeting.
So, and then when we look at that, and so we get back just a little bit deeper there, the DES showed up because of a complaint for erosion sediment over on the Whitney Hill side. So if we look at the Whitney Hill property, there's a culvert that goes under that road there, under Moody Farm, and that's what they were called for. They showed up, they didn't see any evidence of that happening, and while on site, they came over to, this is the story that I've been told from DS, they came over to look at the diversion. And so that's where they thought that, they said, were rocks moved? Again, I don't know the origin of this yet. We will get to the bottom of it through the 91A process. And their concern when we were on site with them from an erosion control standpoint was the banks. In that process, we saw a whole lot of erosion flagging. And so we had sat down with them and we said, okay, did you guys put this up? And they said no. Did we put it up? They said no. We would really like to know who put up the erosion flag or the wetlands designation flagging, right? Because we don't believe it's also in the correct spot, and DES confirmed that as well. So it wasn't the town, it wasn't Black Mountain, it wasn't Whitney's, it wasn't DES. Was it the Conservation Commission?
We are part of the town. I have no knowledge. I think that question came up in our June meeting.
We responded to Chris about that. We have no knowledge of that. We assumed it was part of the remediation process.
No. So that's very confusing to us, is who's walking around putting up incorrect, in our opinion, wetlands delineation flagging. But that's fine. And so when we left the DS meeting, we basically left with, okay, you do have a snowmaking permit. Okay, it went from don't put sandbags anywhere near this thing to maybe actually we could use sandbags to divert water somewhere else to actually, we think everything's probably okay here. And we'll get back together and talk if anything else additional needs to be done. But I think their main concern was the bank erosion control possible concern. And we talked about a handful of very, very simple steps. So my understanding right now is that DES has not identified or seen an issue, and stands heavily corrected from the letter that they wrote.
That, just two comments again, this is just to try to get the factual basis. The erosion control issues were brought up before the winter snows.
Mm-hmm.
They were brought up in June. We didn't bring it up, it was brought to us. We instructed that individual, because we're not the enforcement group, to the selectmen and to New Hampshire DES. It was out of our control, we did our job at that point, is instructing them. The second time that it happened, which was because we did have a drought year, so there was no runoff during the summer, so there was no sediment runoff. However, in the storms that came in late September through November, which gave us 1 to 2 inches in some of those storms, which are not big storms at this time, there was a tremendous amount of silt moving down through the river. As I mentioned, I did go up and take a look, and the river above was clear, pretty much, and down below was running pretty heavily below your site. But that happens during the event and the day or two after, because our systems here are pretty flashy. And then as the water levels drop, you're not going to see because there's no water to move it off the land. If you had sediment control in around your areas there, I couldn't observe it when I drove by.
Yeah, and we certainly do.
I didn't see hay there, I didn't see any silt areas. And obviously, if they were there, they were ineffective, because the river from your point down was running turbid. The river above was not running turbid.
But again, I think this is what we just have to be really careful of, or what I would ask the conservation to be very careful of, is sort of those blanket statements that we don't, or implying that we don't have erosion control, because we do. We have significant erosion control, and it's very, very well documented. I have a lot of conversations back and forth with Kevin Bennett, and sometimes he says, look, I'd really like you to put something here. And then we put something there. It wasn't exceptional weather here. I mean, the place was an absolute dust ball. I mean, we had no rain for a very, very long time. And then all the rain came fairly quickly. So I do disagree with, there is a responsibility to, in my opinion, to not just say or imply to the people of this town that we have no erosion control. Or to imply to the people of town that we could, or our permit does not allow to suck the river dry. Like we have receipts of thousands of dollars of erosion control materials and things in places, and swales, and dams. And yes, there is a lot of construction going on out there. There's no question, right? But
But I think the real question, Eric, that we keep dancing around is, we don't disagree about the diversion structures. We're not going to tell you how to build those. But sufficient flow should still be provided in the bypass. And I think number 2 is on erosion control. It's not that you have it there, is it adequate so that we don't observe what we're observing? That's the real question.
But I also disagree with your observations as well. And if you give us some photos and some videos and some things that show like that's where it comes down to, right? It's and I understand we're all individuals and we all have our opinions on things, right? But conservation commission, what I would really expect, like for example, when we had a very large rain event in the middle of a big construction piece when we were redoing our beginner hill, right? Out came Department of Transportation. We met with them, we walked around. We said, okay, this is what we do. This is where we put some hay, some straw bales, some erosion silt fencing, and we did it, right? And then away it goes. So I disagree. I just disagree with your narrative.
Okay, may I, just on erosion control, the sandbagging, excuse me, was the problem. Not the sandbags, but when they deteriorated, that's what was going downstream and offending people.
There's no way that's even. I mean, you're talking about 50 pounds of sand.
No.
And a
I'm
sandbag.
talking about the fabric that contained the sand. The sand isn't the issue.
Yeah.
It was the fabric floating down
Agreed.
of, deteriorated
And
sandbags.
Plastic kind of woven fabric. We have to pick them out all the time. It's agreed.
Grain bags. I mean, that's.
I mean,
Yeah.
yes.
So, as you think of other methods,
Yeah.
you might avoid that one.
I would love to. I mean, those things get sucked up and go into a pond filter and stop our cooling for our air compressors, and we have $1 million problem. It's challenging. I would personally, I would love to see. Look, this system and everything. It was designed as a loose word in 1956, and
Very loose.
it is not scientific in any way. I would love to see a wholesale repurpose of that thing. I can share that we are under contract to buy that parcel from Whitney's, so that we are not in a scenario where it's someone else's land and then we have the easement. We want to be able to go ahead and take total control of that. I'd like to rebuild it, from the ground up. I'd like to put a dry hydrant in so that we know we have that water source. That would make our insurance company very happy as well. And I'd love to have a diversion structure if we can agree on what that looks like and how it works. We don't need more than 1.7 million gallons. We couldn't use it per day. It's not like we're trying to go for 5,000 or 15,000 gallons a day. So I'm very happy with the amount of water that we have, that we are entitled to. I'm just not. We could definitely be a lot better in. I agree with how it comes out of the brook, more scientific, and just less work. It is not fun to put sandbags and mess around with that whole thing. So I think it's just a little bit of a reframe of the discussion. And to be frank and direct, I don't want it to be, I want to have a great working relationship with the commission, but that goes both ways, where, you know, like you guys have not had a meeting with me about this yet, right? Like, I'm happy to go and walk around and do a site visit with you guys and talk about it, just like I said that we've done with Department of Transportation. And if you have concerns, then let's get our team together and let's go down there. Let's figure out how to fix it.
Eric, in all fairness to the commission, and we do get this sometimes from other applicants and sometimes we don't, is they notify us in advance and come in and talk to us before they do this kind of construction and so on and so forth. It's not our job to go out and try to figure out who's doing what construction and then tell them to come see us. I think in all fairness.
I mean, that's not the way the laws are written. You're not part of the approval process for that construction.
We
That
are
is
part of the
incorrect.
process. That is incorrect.
Okay, well, did you think that we didn't follow the permit process for the fire dredging or the pond? I mean, we had multiple meetings with the town about it. There's hundreds of emails. I mean, you're a town functioning body, correct?
Well,
We do not issue any permits, but if a permit was submitted for review, the
Uh-huh.
Conservation Commission would review that before it was submitted to NHDES.
that's correct.
But we don't need to
When
get a
this
permit from
issue
NHDS.
became an issue in November of '24, when we first approached the select board about this, our only response to that was that all permits needed to be required, or all required permits for operating in a wetlands and the standard dredge and fill permit that the state requires. This town doesn't have a requirement for that, but the state does. The prior owners of Whitney's Inn and Black Mountain applied for that permit in 2016 at the end of this process for this exact, for the maintenance of the snowmaking pond. So the prior owners applied for a permit.
But it was deemed from the governor that that permit was not needed and the letter of objection was withdrawn. I mean, those are the facts. That letter of deficiency was withdrawn, and that permit process was stopped because it was indicated that it didn't need to happen. And what the work that we did
They applied for the permit after that, the permit fulfilled the requirement for the work. Permit was issued.
So you're talking something different than the diversion permit. You're talking about the maintenance permit.
Yes, and so when this came up, that Jay Henry asserted that it was a snowmaking pond or a fire pond, and that his authority under the RSA, that he was able to maintain those ponds, that was his assertion. We feel differently. NHDES is the ultimate arbiter in that case. It's not going to go against you if you just submit a permit for the work that has been done.
Unless if we don't need a permit to do that work, right? Like,
I think that is a determination by NHDES.
and
not-
they've made that determination and they have indicated that we didn't need it. We have no letter of deficiency from them on that work. And we discussed this on site as well, that it's well within our scope to be able to do that work without a dredging permit. I mean, it is a statutory piece where we don't have to do that. It is a fire pond.
Eric, let me ask you the question a little different way, because you indicated, because I'm looking forward, trying to figure out, like everybody is here, this isn't to try to shut you down.
Sure.
I think people in town don't want to see Black Mountain go away because of these issues, but we do want to see Black Mountain operating with the same kinds of rules that others have to meet as well. And if you just mentioned that you're potentially going to buy out and proceed ahead and make the snowmaking pond bigger and better, which is probably the best way to proceed so that you can still provide.
That would
for us.
require a full permit.
And that would require a permit.
100%.
And that permit would come before us. So we can look backwards or we can look forward. But if that is your plan, that is essentially part of what I read off in one of the recommendations here. And to clarify when that happens, that we still have adequate flows in the bypass and downreach.
And we have to make sure, our decision, my decision is to make sure, council's decision is to make sure that anything that we do does not damage our historical use. And if we cannot move forward without damaging our historical use, then we will just hang on to our historical use. So I think if we want a different, better result, then we're gonna have to agree on what that is up there.
And then all we would do is ask clarity from DES as to how much water still is necessary in these two reaches to still meet water quality standards, because that is their obligation.
Does DES plan on issuing an update to this letter?
They-
Because there are several other points
Yes,
that they make that are unrelated to the snowmaking.
yes, specifically, I can try to, I don't have the letter in front of me, but I can try to talk to them if you want to go
Well-
through those other points briefly.
Point 2 is, or I'm sorry, point 3 is by February 13th, 2026, please retain a qualified environmental consultant with experience in stream restoration or fluvial geomorphology. Please notify NHDES of the name, mailing address, email address, and telephone number of the consultant retained.
Yeah, we do have an environmental engineer on board. We have for in a couple different phases. But I believe that requirement was retracted. Our environmental engineer was on site, and we did all talk and basically go through that process.
Point 4, submit a restoration plan to NHDES.
Yeah, my understanding is that is no longer in the cards. That essentially, when we left that meeting, we were not going to be going in there and doing anything different. There was some talk about the banks and some erosion control there, but again, it was very difficult to see under the snow. But when we looked at photos, historical photos, they're sort of concerned. There's sort of that peninsula that goes out in between the two where there was that photo of small excavator tracks on that piece. They said that they don't have an issue with that out there. They're concerned about the bank from the actual slope, down to the toe, from the top down to the toe. So there was a conversation when the snow goes that maybe we need to put a little bit of hay or something, on some banks. We're talking about a bale or two, but we're not even sure what's there. I mean, they indicated that no substantial trees were removed and none of those things were going on. So we currently do not have we are discussing what the follow-up would look like, and it's really around the sandbags more than anything. There haven't been substantial discussions around
Have you
sedative
replied
radiation.
formally to this letter? Would you include us in the response?
I believe we have filed formally to that. I have to ask counsel if that's okay.
Well, it would be on record once it gets to DES, it should be.
Yes, it should be available via a 91A or something else, but I don't believe, I can't remember if it was a full letter or if it's an email chain, because the email chain's a ton of them right now around that, but
Well,
I
think
can get
our
you that
main-
response for sure.
I think our main concerns was just that the points that they had raised were questions that we had also had
Yeah,
in the past, so.
yeah, I think it would be a great idea for us to get you that response and that communication so that you guys can see, the position that we took back to DES and the direction that we're moving in there. I think that's a great idea.
And Eric, maybe if you can clarify one thing, because and you tell me if I understood this correct, you were basically saying that you take the water, you put it in snow, but you return it. It's
Most of the water does get returned back to the
And I
sewage.
personally don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
The only thing that's misleading about that comment, and I've heard it time and time again, when I worked on water quality and water quantity issues, is time-wise is what's really relevant.
Sure.
You take the water when the river's driest, because here in the east, and I'm very familiar with most of these flow issues, is your lowest flows are typically the end of December, January, and February, for multiple reasons. One is you don't have base flow because your ground is frozen. Number two is all of your incoming precip is being stored as snow. 50 to 60% of your annual runoff will come during the spring runoff in April and March. But your lowest flows when you want water in most ski industries, in fact, many of the ski industries this year were impeded in when they could make snow because the flows were so low. So yes, the water comes back, but you're taking it when it's most stressful on the system, and you're returning it when it's least needed by the system. So annually, you're correct. Relative to water quality, water quantity issues, that's a misleading statement.
Yep, and I appreciate that perspective. I'm not a water expert like yourself, so I do agree that, you know, when we take it and when we put it back, I'd agree with your timelines for sure.
It's like telling somebody you got oxygen in the room except for 10 minutes. Well,
Yeah.
that's very nice.
It's a 10 minutes, man,
Yeah.
for sure. But again, I can only, I have to go off the permit that we were issued and follow that as best as we possibly can.
Is, and this is a question just for understanding, because we keep weaving around here a little bit, but are you contending that your permit could take that amount of water? I'm not saying you did, I'm just asking, are you putting the position out that you could take that amount of water regardless of what the natural flows are in drought conditions, et cetera?
I don't know. I'd have to look at the permit, honestly, I don't know.
I tried to look at it, but I couldn't access it.
And it was actually, DS didn't have it, it was here at Town of Jackson, so it's here, it's on record here, is where Chris found it.
Because I would be surprised if that's what.
Is
the
it
permit's-
under Alpine Services?
Alpine Resources Corp. It may be one of the previous entities. It's quite old.
Yeah.
I
But that would be contradictory to both the river ordinance and when the town sought designation.
the permit predates both of those, including the use.
Yeah, and then the question is, does it guarantee that you can take that regardless of other situations?
Maybe the other
Thank you.
question is too, would you take as much water as you could, even if it was in a drought and it wasn't providing sufficient water downstream, regardless of what the permit says? Would you?
We can only take as much water as the permit, and it isn't that much water. Like the 1.7, I mean, it's not gonna dry up the brook, you know, for a week or two. Like it isn't that much water. And most of that water is in the pond. So it's not an unreasonable amount of water. It's actually quite low. Like a ski area like Black, ideally, if you, in my ideal world, we would have 5 million gallons a day and pump 3,000 to 4,000 gallons a minute, and we pump 1,200. It's not a huge push. It takes us a long time. Like it's a more gradual, continuous draw instead of these massive pushes that you'll see at these big areas that turn on 500 guns at once.
The problem that happened, particularly this year, is the flows in most rivers were extremely low. So,
And we're
like,
gonna,
I mean, I know Jackson Ski Touring's water permit, which is a new one, it's not an old one, but essentially we have to monitor what the flows are on the Saco at the Bartlett gauge, and then we have to prorate it for the watershed size. And then, and this year that's actually happened, there were times we could not run at the capacity that we were permitted at, for the simple reason is the flows there were insufficient to still provide downstream flows. Now that's a new permit, I don't know what his permit says. Can you access it? No, it said during the day hours, it typically is not accessible, which is what I discovered. But you say it's on record here? that-
yes, it's on record. And I think that would help us all to just really dive into what that permit says and where it's at.
I mean, we're just trying to carry responsibilities of the town ordinance and the comprehensive river management plan, and it's pretty clearly outlined. Those were the things that the state agreed to, those are the things that the town agreed to, and that's the thing. And we, as the commission, we were charged to make sure that these things are met. So we're trying to do our due diligence.
Yes, I think that this commission is a fantastic asset for this town, and I think you guys should continue to do that due diligence. But I would ask that due diligence, you know, be based very specifically on you know, because the town certainly listens to this commission, and then they read the e-news and they do the things, and I just want to make sure that the narrative is attached to reality in terms of that we do have a permit.
Is there anything that I mentioned here that's not based in reality?
I think, again, the comments around, I disagree with your station around the sediment and those things around potentially not implying in some manner that we did not have erosion control or that it wasn't being done.
I think the
correctly.
implication was insufficient.
Insufficient.
There's a difference between you didn't do it and whether it's sufficient. Just be
Yeah.
careful about
That's fine.
spinning words back here.
Yeah, and then I would say also around, are we taking too much water? Are we diverting water in a way that we are not allowed to? I take issues with some of those stances, but I think it's something that we can work through, for sure.
Do you disagree that the bypass currently only has a trickle in it?
I have not gone out and looked underneath the snow, but it certainly has
You don't have
water.
to look underneath the snow.
It certainly has water in it, for
I
sure.
didn't say it didn't, I just said it was a trickle.
And
And as I mentioned in the CRMP, when the town went through this, they recognized the diversion, and it recognized that some could be taken. When you reduce to a trickle, and almost all the water, which is currently what's happening, is flowing through the pond. That's not some.
well, again, what is a trickle? There are no flow meters. There's a lot of interpretation there.
Eric, you could not measure the flow out there now because a flow meter couldn't measure it at that flow. I can,
Well, I can't tell you. I mean, if we have no flow meter, then we don't know the flow.
okay, I think we've had enough there.
Well, I think just, the Conservation Commission has no authority to enforce state rules, and when people come to us, that is very hard to tell them. And we ask that everyone who is doing projects in town do projects to the highest standards, and part of that is obtaining, filing their plans so that they're public and available, so that we can see if they're being met, those standards, so we don't have to guess at what you're doing. I think that was part of after the initial dredging, when I think Kevin's response to it is that you needed to put in more silt fencing, that it needed to be dug in, that, you know, if we had a plan filed, that we could have just said, we know what you're doing, so when people come to us and ask what's going on, like, well, we don't know, we can only see what is going, we can observe from the road. It's a very visible location, so anything that is done will get remarked on. And we would just like to be able to say it's being done to the highest standards, and we can't know that unless we're informed of what you're doing. That is not a requirement. We just ask that, you know, to make good neighbors and just calm tensions.
Agreed, and I think, you know, again, but I can't read your mind on those things, and this is now we have a request to, you know, keep us in the loop and do those things, but we spend a significant amount of time talking with the town, and maybe I'm not you guys as the town, or maybe I have that mixed up somehow, but when we talk about dredging the pond, like, this was not something we went out and did at night. Like, we had multiple conference calls, there was significant work around who was gonna pay for it. I mean, I think it popped up at least 3 different meetings.
Certainly
in the
aware.
public forum and on the e-news and all of those things. And I understand that Kevin came up and said, look, there may be some deficiencies about how this silt fence is put in, so fix it. And we fixed it very, very quickly.
Yeah, I just think that the NHDES wetlands permitting process outlines all of those things. It says that you,
But we were exempt from that process because we were dredging the fire pond.
that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
You could see yourself as exempt, or you can see yourself as exemplary. And that is what we're asking. Not asking, but that would just be nice. It would be nice to say you're going above and beyond what is expected of you.
So you would have us file a permit with DES when we don't need one? Or would you like us to, like, file a quasi permit with you guys?
I think just
I mean, but I'm just asking.
go to do the work to the standards,
And,
whether you have a permit or not.
yeah,
Do it correctly.
yeah, well, I
If
think we
if you
want
have
to.
an on-staff wetland scientist, develop a plan, say what it is, what your steps are, what your dates are, what your achievable goals are, who can we contact? If we have questions that it comes up.
So here's the challenge. Here's
But Eric, can I
the
interrupt?
thought that real
Yeah,
quick
go
though,
ahead.
Ken, here's what I would say to you guys is if what would help me a lot, and maybe it's very elementary, but develop a policy or develop something formalized that you would like from me, right? I can't read your mind and do those things. So if you say, hey, look, we know this is not required. This is optional. And set the expectation that the businesses do those optional things. And I would love to be one of those businesses that says, you know what, we are gonna go to the higher standard, we are gonna do the extra thing, we are gonna lay it out, and just create a PDF or a document or form.
We don't create regulations as a commission, we don't create ordinances as a commission.
I think it's more of an opt-in policy is what we're being asked for, but.
Eric, I think you're trying to flip the switch here, but I would go back to what I said a few minutes ago, because we're in a circular argument here that's non-productive. If your intention is to buy and to move forward and improve the pond, you're gonna need permits.
100%.
Let's look there. But our response here, and that's what I read off in the recommendations here, is that's probably the best thing. That's where that's what the New Hampshire ski area recommends to all ski areas now, because of the drought issues, the changes in flows, et cetera, is to increase your capacity so that these are not issues. That's separate than the sediment issue, but it does get to the water quality. When you go and proceed with that, it is going to open up your grandfather and so forth, because you're going to be making changes. If you increase the capacity of the amount of water you're using, at least with the new permits that are issued, you have to go and tell DES that you've changed the capacity and what you're using and how you do it. Whether you did that or not, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think what is important to understand is it is not the capacity. I'm quite happy with the 1.7. For me, what I would change about the pond in that area would be the storage, right? So that, let's just say we could take
And I think that's the right way to go.
100%, because then we can take 50 gallons at a time and have the storage to not have the question about the diversion, right? Like we could say,
And
look,
that's where most ski areas are going.
yeah,
I don't
we could
disagree with
divert
that.
less. We could line the pond so that there was no seepage and everything was stored and done correctly. And then, you know, we don't have to, less water would
If
be
that's put
diverted.
forth as a proposal in your permits, it would come to us, but I think that's the very thing we'd be looking for.
Just more storage so that we can make
So the
snow
bypass in the
unready.
downstream, when you're in low flow and drought conditions, is getting sufficient flow. That's how you address those issues.
Which,
And I think you outlined that that's where you intend to go, which I think is perfect.
yeah, that's where I want to go, and I'd like to, you know, triple storage there so that.
But our issue right now
Divert
is,
less.
we look at how much water is being diverted, we look at what has been designated, et cetera, and what the conditions are, and they don't jive. And we have to report that.
And I think
Now,
that's
what the others do with it is up to them.
yeah,
But we're just reporting what we can observe and what has been reported to us by the residents and so
and,
forth.
and again, back to some forms, like how are you reporting that? Like, is there a informal, like,
I think-
observation notice?
Eric, I think I explained that in the beginning, that we would put this together, we would submit it to you, but we would be responding to your letter and to the letter that
Gotcha,
came
okay.
from, and I prefaced that at the very beginning.
Yeah, I just needed some
I don't
clarity.
know what else you want us to do.
No, I like something in writing and very specific.
That's what we
Because I
would do.
can't-
We said that in the beginning.
Okay, perfect, yeah.
Okay. Well, that aside, if you were any other resident operating in wetlands jurisdiction where there were standards that needed to be met,
What, again, can you define the wetland jurisdiction? I mean, obviously, we know the banks and all things that come automatically in, but where is the wetland jurisdiction? Like, where is the map with the wetlands jurisdiction on it?
Burr Phillips, when he designed the diversion structure in 2015, had it surveyed. And North Country Soil Science surveyed the property and flagged wetlands. Here's the old, or that is their plan.
Yeah, and this was part of the permit piece that was dropped when Sununu came in and said, you know, no deal.
We know the history there.
Yeah.
Yes, so,
But that doesn't negate everything that's on that map.
Well, I mean, depends. You know, we don't know. Like we don't know.
have you prepared a map?
We have not prepared a map.
Okay.
I mean, but again, when we come to a permit, we can look to do that. But in general, right now, what we believe is that the wetlands are obviously the banks and stuff that comes in automatically. you know, if we want to go in and do our own survey and say, look, this is where we believe the wetlands are, or the town wants to do that.
Well, it's not on the town's responsibility, it's the property owner's responsibility to.
If we want to
ensure that-
change anything, you know, we're not right now looking to change anything at this given point in time. So and this is what comes back to the wetland delineation question, like, you know, who went out and put all the wetland flags everywhere, and are they actually wetlands? You know, maybe the next step forward is to agree on that, and the town participates, we participate in a true wetland study or
We
something.
can't agree only because we don't know who put the flags out there.
Well, I just want to know where the wetlands are, because I can't get behind that statement by you
All we
looking
have for wetlands is the map that Ben just gave you.
that ended up being not submitted as part of any plan.
That doesn't make the map incorrect.
Well, the
Whether
map,
you didn't need a permit or not.
the map is a draft, like, this is not something that's in records as town wetlands. This is not in town records as like designated wetlands. So I just want to be clear, when you say we're operating in designated wetlands there, you're basing that on a draft map that, of part of a permit that was not applied for because the governor said you don't need it anymore.
That's separate, the permit. The map is the map.
It is like building plans for a house that you don't build.
That's not a totally accurate statement,
No,
Eric, so let's
that's
not go
not
there.
true.
Okay, well.
That is physically there.
So,
Well, no, a lot of this is not physically there. Like, obviously, all the proposed diversion structures and all the things, and where this pipe is not there. There's something called the old pump house, which is not in the correct spot. So, no, this is not an accurate map.
Okay.
I mean, there are a ton of things here that aren't here. This is a proposal to put in a diversion structure that never happened.
But it was also a map, and I'm not an expert on the map, and I won't pretend to be, but it has the physical structures and where they may be put, but it also has the underlying environmental parameters as they currently exist
I haven't done that level of due diligence.
at that time.
At that time. I haven't done that level of due diligence, so I don't know.
okay, and I think the state has asked if that level of due diligence be performed as part of your May 29th deadline.
Yeah, and as I
mean, if
indicated, I
you've
think
had-
that position's changed.
Okay, I mean,
And we'll get a copy of this?
Yes,
All the
yeah.
changes?
Yeah, well, we will give you our response for sure, and then, you know, I would suggest reading that response potentially prior to you guys formulating your response to us, but that's obviously up to you guys. But
I'm sorry, I spaced for a minute. Which response?
our response to DES, our written response to DES, following our site visit with them, we'll definitely get you a copy of that. And again, I don't know if it was an official response or if it was accumulation of emails.
But our requirement is to report to DES as we know it now. And I think that's what we should do. Because if DES proceeds to issue you something without our response, then it gets rather awkward rather fast.
So then, that's perfect. You know,
And I think I read off what I'm recommending to the commission as to how we would respond based on CRMP and the river ordinances, et cetera, out there, and the issues out there. And I was glad to hear this evening that what your potential future plans goes in the right direction. I think, you know, as long as it comes in with proper engineering and that's the very thing I think we'd recommend, as DES recommends to all ski areas today. There's nothing unusual about that. It's what's considered best management practices for snowmaking in the ski industry today.
okay, well, I think you reached a good point. Do you have anything to add, Joe?
Only that I think that, you know, as an advisory committee, recommending to the town that, you know, all entities that draw water demonstrate and document sufficient water flow is not a bad idea. And I guess I think if DS has had a visit and written a follow-up letter that removes or negates some of these things, really important to see, and I kind of feel like it's not that it's not worth talking about, but it's not worth continuing like a circular conversation if there's information we don't
Yeah.
have that, you know,
Or if they've made
adds, expands, and
decisions
negates.
that we don't know.
Yeah, so,
Certainly.
yeah.
Okay.
And my recommendation is, I mean, I read off here and it's into the record now, that I would provide this to Ben and we'd draft the letter and respond accordingly. And if anybody here is, I mean, you all had a chance to look at the River Conservation and CRP plan. Those were all made available to everybody before this meeting. And our response, as I say, would go appropriately to you folks, to DES, to the selectmen, and the ones who sent us letters. And then we can
And-
say,
I think that's great, and when I look at, again, different, better results, different, better action, what I would propose is when we get to an appropriate time in spring, that we bring the Conservation Committee up, we talk about, you know, what projects we might be looking at, go through things, see what's going on. I think we could invite community members. And I would highly, highly encourage, as you guys receive complaints, right? If you do receive complaints, then, you know, certainly pass them right on to me. Like, you can start an email chain, and someone says, look, I was walking my dog this morning and I have a really big issue with something. It's like, okay, well, let's figure that
No,
out.
our role in that, and I think I explained that in the beginning, which is what we did when the complaint came in June, is when somebody comes in and complains about that, we're not the enforcement agency. We tell them to go to the selectmen and to DES because they are the proper, we should not be inserting ourselves and telling people how the follow-up should happen. That's their responsibility to report those, in which case those reporting agencies should then contact you.
Yes, and we have a single complaint to DES.
And when those complaints come, they are in our meeting minutes, which are available.
Yeah, we have a single complaint to DES, which around the erosion, and which DES found no issue when they conducted an on-site visit.
But they did, and I mean, we've been through this, I feel like we're going around and around the merry-go-round. Their site visit was in December, which is different than when the rain events and the runoff happened before snow, ice, and lockup. So yes, that may be what they observed. That's not my understanding. That's not exactly what they reported. I think they did report that they saw some sediment, but the thing is, during the ice-free, snow-free period in September, October, and November, a number of people, myself included, noticed pretty dramatic increases in sediment load in Great Brook. And the one time that I did go up to just say, what the heck's happening here? All I could observe was above up at where the Dundee Road Bridge was, the river was pretty clear, and the sediment load coming down was pretty high below your operation. That would indicate, I'm using the term indicate, that adequate erosion control was not there. And it was very obvious. You didn't have to be blind. I mean, you had to almost be blind to see how much exposed earth that you had. And as I say, I didn't see hay bales when I went up there. I didn't see silt control measures, etc. So it's not hard to assume that's where that sediment was coming from between that evidence. I'm not making accusations.
Sure.
We're not asking that actions be taken, but it does require us to go back and tell the selectmen, we think when the future permits are being issued for your construction up there, that two things happen, that it be demonstrated that you do have adequate sediment control, and that the town follow up to see, and they gotta check during the precipitation, major events, and immediately after. You can't go up a week or two later and look and say, hey, it's clear, because that's normally what happens.
I mean, Kevin's there all the time. Like we have, I
Yep.
think we've pulled 18 building permits or something in the last 2 years, right? Like it's
Yep.
not, there's a lot of people walking around up there.
But I think we both agree that proper sediment control is necessary. I don't know why we're
You
arguing.
know,
about this.
100%, absolutely. So,
Then- then
I would also say, I appreciate that you coming here in person and not just
I do
being the
too.
letter. I appreciate that. I appreciate you offering to meet up there and take site visits, and, you know, there's no time like the present to make communication as good as it can be, so we do appreciate that. Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you. Off the record, I love what you're doing.
Thanks, man.
it's great skiing, it's so good to be able to ski there. We want to see you succeed.
All three of my kids have passes. They love it. It's their favorite place.
It's a cool place. There's a lot of people to keep happy. There's a lot of things that have to happen. You know, that property was, you know, you want to talk about sucking the life out of something, right? There was just a lot of depreciation there. There's just a lot of things that have to be done, and we've had to do them at a very, very quick pace because of sort of that co-op type model and where things need to go. And it's a lot, and this is a small town, but we're seeing this everywhere too. I mean, the amount of building permits that have been being pulled in the last couple of years, right? You know, the size of the police force, there are a lot of considerations. There's a lot of push and pull. And we're very, very visible. The only thing that I ask is just make it as clear for me as you possibly can. If you want something to be done, then just give me a policy, give me a procedure. Let's have a site visit. Let's figure out what I can do. Because for me, I don't actually think we disagree that much on what has to happen.
I don't either, and I think from the list I read off, but it's not us to tell you what to do. It's for us to tell the selectmen and DES the concerns and our recommendations and how those concerns, I don't think in this conversation, I agree with you, I don't think there's a tremendous whip. But that's our responsibility, both under the CRMP, the charge of a conservation commission, but don't ask us also to take a role that we're not supposed to take.
Yep.
And overreach what we're supposed to do or not do.
Okay, very good.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I'm gonna let you guys finish if you don't need me anymore, but thank you. Yes, and sorry.
Well, this might cover a lot of similar ground.
It did. There's a lot there.
Right.
So I don't know if everybody knows me. I'm the superintendent of Wentworth Golf Course. I've been over there since 2020. My name's Zach, by the way. And also, I don't know if everybody's aware, but the Wentworth Golf Course sold as of November 5th of 2025. New owners of the golf course are the Wentworth Hotel, so we are working on a master plan currently to improve infrastructure of the drainage and the irrigation around the golf course. Which brings me here today to talk about a master drainage plan and potential pond dredging and ways to more effectively move water off the golf course. I sent an email kind of late this afternoon, just with the finalized plans at the first step of what we're looking to do. And it's just basic pond dredging to clear out years of silt and sediment that we've seen in those ponds, and then beginning that conversation with the board here, the commission, and then looking at the proper permitting process from the very beginning to make sure that we all abide by the rules and that we're doing everything properly out there. I have one paper copy of that on me right now, if anybody else to take a look at it.
We have one copy.
I made one, I don't know if anybody else has one.
I looked at it earlier. I could probably pull it up on my phone.
Yeah.
But it's really just discussing with the commission here, getting the proper permitting, getting the soil scientists, the site engineers, everything that I learned from the previous conversation that we need.
We
Good
appreciate
notes
you.
for that.
After what we just went through.
Learned a lot of good information, a lot of good notes to pass on.
I'll just do what you want.
Bring it back, go and go. Really with the drought this year, we saw the ponds, the lowest level obviously we ever have, and we truly could see the amount of sediment that's in these ponds and the water volume capacity that we've lost. And it's also under my belief that the water table across the golf course has increased because of these ponds losing their water holding capacity with the sediment that's in them. And that's the first and foremost issue we want to address out there, and dredging some of these ponds to get that water table across the property lowered and better move all the water off of not only the golf course, but the Wentworth Hall Avenue up behind the property, and then the water that comes down from Mirror Lake, and then from potentially even as far up as the Eagle Mountain House that comes down through those trails. There's multiple points that water enters the golf course and then traverses through it, and we just want to make sure we're keeping those water pathways clean and efficient for everything to move off the property. We're really just looking for recommendations and contacts at this point in time, and making sure that we are doing everything that we can to make sure we don't avoid any issues with obviously erosion control or silt sediment and everything else in those aspects of what we want to do out there.
And I don't expect you to like answer or have specifics or anything, but in the last paragraph of it, it talks about, along with the pond dredging, we're looking to clean many of the small streams throughout the course. And I just didn't know what that, like cleaning a stream, what that meant.
It's a good question. So the past 4 years, around this time in March, when the ground's starting to thaw, but we don't have any habitat or wildlife necessarily extremely active, and I could be mistaken on that with your PhD in that, but I'll go out with basically a clam rake and some of our small streams that are no wider than this in the property. I'll just go out, for those that are listening, it's about 6 to 8 inches. I'll go out and I'll muck those streams with the clam rake just to get any of the growth that we see throughout the summer out of there to make sure that we are keeping that water flowing through freely. It's not bending up on anything. And I'll just go with a pair of muck boots and a hand tool and I'll clean those out myself. So the cleaning that I'm referring to in that statement is a hand tool going out and just making sure waterways are open to move the spring melt off the golf course effectively.
Like more sediments or more like woody debris?
Woody debris, some grass debris. I don't have the specifics of what.
No, it's fine. I'm just, yeah.
But yeah, sticks that we see, leaves that we see, stuff that dams up, drains and everything else, and mainly just leaves, but then some grassy growth that is starting to just occur in the very spring, getting those out of the pond or the waterways just to make sure everything flows effectively.
Zach, overall, I would echo, we appreciate you coming in prematurely like this as opposed to after the fact, which you just saw what happens when that happens. But the only thing that I missed going through that, and this is just, is the one pond down here, because I'm familiar with it, has a lot of invasives around it.
Yeah,
So,
the knotweed.
yes.
Yes, very bad.
So obviously, when you dredge that out, it begs the question of where's it going?
Right.
We did have invasives that were cleared off with stumps before they were brought up to Prospect Farm, and all of a sudden we started getting invasives up there. But anytime you dig up or remove those, it's a question of how are you disposing of them so that you're not just moving it from your problem to somebody else's problem in the future.
No, it's a good point. We see a lot of that. We control it the best we can. We cut them down before the seed heads start to bloom in the spring of the year. And a couple of the areas along the riverbank, I started to lay black plastic over those, held down with cinder blocks or other type of material to help them from blooming. Minus excavation, there's no way we can eliminate this stuff. Those are waterways.
And then the question is, where is the material going?
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
that's how it gets spread.
And that's part of what we're planning is developing with this master plan is reusing those soils onto the golf course, building tee boxes, renovating some of the turf areas, bringing some areas up to level. Everything at this time we're planning for using on the course and not hauling offsite, but again, we're in the very early phases and we don't know what type of material we're gonna generate from these projects either. But we definitely need to reestablish some of the pond banks and everything and also be careful of the knotweed to not make that situation worse. But we do
Or
try
to move it elsewhere,
Exactly.
when you're just trying to dispose of it.
Right. Yeah, we try.
And that's not easy.
Stuff is, it's amazing how fast it comes up each year. Yeah, we do try and control it the best we can with just really weed whackers. We don't put anything chemical on it because we know we can't touch by the waters. I went to Penn State for turfgrass science, so I have my, turfgrass science degree, and I've been working in the industry for 18 years, so I know the permitting, I have my pesticide applicator's license for over there, so I know what I can and can't do around the waterways and what we're grandfathered in with, and all those type of things involved with what I do in the golf course as well.
But I think overall, I know that your whole system over there is pretty archaic.
Yeah.
Sitting on the Jackson Ski Touring Foundation board, but, to figure out where all your pipes are and to clean up that drainage, because they do fill in over time.
Right.
That's what natural growth does, and if you don't, you lose the very function for which they were designed. So.
And that's one of the conversations to have with Jackson is, with the foundation, Ski Foundation, is we want a pond with the dredging of potentially moving our irrigation system into that pond, so we're now drawing from a pond, and then filling the pond with runoff from the course, but also from the river as needed. So we're not directly drawing from the river right now, which we're currently doing, and then Jackson Ski Foundation can piggyback onto that system somehow potentially for their snowmaking.
That's best both for us and your summer.
Exactly.
If the river's dry and low, you still got.
We did have to shut down
Storage
one
and
pump this summer because the water was so low that
Yeah.
it was drawing air. It was
But weren't you saying that your objective is to lower the groundwater level? So you're lowering the groundwater level, which doesn't it help like irrigate naturally, the greens and all that? Or is there just a fine balance?
Yes and no. When we see heavy downfall rains and the ponds flash flood and fill, we see that surface water sitting because of gray clay, but then the ponds are so filled that our drainage that we have in the golf course can't drain into those ponds because the water table of the pond's so high, but then it's backing up on the golf course. So by lowering that pond and getting the sediment out, we in theory lower what we're seeing for the water on the golf course after flash floods. It's not looking necessarily for the holding capacity long term of it, more for the immediate moving the water off the course after those heavy rain events that we're seeing and through some of the gray clay areas that we have out there as well.
So you're looking at actually increasing the volume in the storage pond here considerably for your summer use then?
Long-term goal
Yeah.
potentially, if the permitting and everything allows, which we haven't scratched the surface on that yet. It's an idea that we've tossed around as moving the pump house from the river to that pond, yeah.
Because I would guess right now the storage in there is pretty minimal, just between the infilling, the growth, the
Exactly, and we've never
vegetation.
done any measurements to even see what that's at, to even know if there's a possibility to do that. We don't know how far down we have to dig, so we're getting the proper permitting in place before we even start doing the math on how much water it can hold, if that's even an option to move the river intake system from there. Because right now, where the irrigation pumps currently sit, during the big heavy floods that we get, we have to pull the intake lines out so they don't get damaged in those rain events that so close to the river.
Ski joint knows that. Except they do it in the winter. not
Yeah,
summer.
exactly. Yeah, I'm usually lucky, the river's pretty low when I can get down into it, but there are those few rare instances where it's way steep trying to pull pipe. Yeah, I believe, just from the previous conversation, they need to contact DES, work with soil scientists, and get the permitting through the state there. As far as determining what is a wetland out there, are there maps available in town here, or are those on the website?
No, well,
The area, I mean,
not to the degree of, that it would be operational for building a plan, that would just be river corridor
Right.
level.
typically the Soil Conservation Service, soil surveys that were done quite a while ago are pretty low intensity when it's not agricultural land. So when you get down, as Ben said, to the site specific, you actually need somebody to go out and delineate. And that's determined by the type of vegetation and
Right.
so on and so forth, yeah.
Okay. So that's the first step, is getting that surveyed and assessed to see what's what, and
Yeah.
then what we do from there.
Right. And, I mean, it sounds like this is gonna be a long project. Do you see it happening in many phases? I mean, what is your master plan timeline, I guess?
It's up to the new ownership.
Okay.
At this time, we're just in the beginning phases, scratching the surface. We don't know if this is something that will happen fall this next year, if it's something that's gonna happen in 2 to 3 phases, if it's something that happens all at once. I truly don't have an answer, because we are just beginning these conversations with them as well. I know in the spring, we're looking at just putting some small 4-inch drainage in some of our fairways in the golf course, not disturbing any of the existing waterways, just helping move some of that standing water. But that water that we are then draining from the course does have to go someplace else, which is why we want to eventually dredge these ponds and everything else out there. But again, those are kind of up to the new ownership of the best timing and availability of their resources to help us with those projects as well. So this is the first step of that process, is meeting here to pass along to them what we need to do next and follow up with that. So I wish I could say spring or fall this year, but I don't have an idea. I truly don't.
I was just wondering if it had progressed along far enough that you had sort of a hierarchy of, your most important needs is moving water off of the golf course, or is it increasing storage capacity, or those two are the same, essentially?
They're kind of the same. In order to move the water off the golf course, we need to increase the capacity of where this water goes. But I think the first thing needs to be addressed to improve playability of the golf course is immediately moving some of the water that we see after these big rain events, particularly in fairways, into the existing waterways, and maintaining those waterways as they are for now, and then the next phase would be dredging the ponds and the bigger picture goal of those projects.
They'll talk all about this when you have people do the surveying and restoration work but I would it'd be awesome to keep some of that woody debris in some of those outflow channels just because the Ellis is such good brook trout habitat.
Yep.
It'd be great to have a little bit of that woody debris just for habitat for macros and that sort of thing
I don't think you want them in those drainage, it's just, quite frankly, because it would stop the very function that they developed them for.
aren't some of them natural or are they all like dug channels?
Well, my observation, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, those are kind of intermittent streams, depending on the flows and so forth, probably were dug out to create drainage historically when that was created.
Oh, okay.
So I'm understanding, like with the woody debris, everything that we have through the course is kind of through the open spaces of what we're looking at doing, and then the areas where they go into the woods or into the Ellis River there, we won't really necessarily touch those areas.
Oh,
So
okay.
we won't disturb those type of habitats.
Okay.
It's mainly just through the open areas of the course at this point in time, right adjacent to fairways and some other areas. There is one habitat there on the largest of the three ponds, identified as Pond 2. That's right adjacent to a heavily wooded area. The only thing we potentially do with brush work in there is just kind of like feathering process to take out some of the lower brush and allow better airflow, but then also keep the bigger trees and everything else just, for those habitats. And then also throughout the summer, we do allow vegetation around the pond on the immediate bank to actually grow up, just to make sure that there isn't any contamination of anything we do put in the golf course into those waterways. We just try to make sure that we maintain that brush there all summer and trim it back in the fall of the year to prevent extra woody growth and everything like that.
So you've got a buffer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we make sure we maintain that buffer all summer long until we're done with lawn making applications. So November or so, we'll trim it back.
Sounds like you're pretty well versed in the best management practices to me.
Been involved in a few of those, yes.
And you're not saying that you were there before permitting was required?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know what the permitting or the water capacity is of the golf course. I've heard rumors what we can pool within a month, but I've never actually checked to see what those numbers actually are.
And what about fertilizers?
Fertilizers? So I use one granular fertilizer annually for the whole golf course. Spread it through a tractor, no potassium or no phosphorus in it. I do my best to make sure I stay away from open waterways and everything else like that. I make sure that I'm turning the tractor so it doesn't go into those little streams or any of those. Extremely difficult because it is a tight property with a big tractor, but making those applications, I'm fully aware of what I'm surrounded by and where the water flows to minimize any input into the river and waterways. And I'm also making sure that no heavy floods are in the immediate future and that the water levels of the course aren't too high so that that has time to absorb into the soil and not run off from the property.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to seeing your plans.
Yeah, I'll start with that and get the submission in so you're aware of the process as long as with the DES.
The state maintained a database of certified wetland scientists. I can probably send a link to you, but there are only a few in the North Country, so but I can send that list if you. I don't know if we have any particular recommendations on working with anyone, but.
No, that'd be helpful. The current ownership group is based out of Connecticut, so it's a lot of me kind of looking this stuff up for the local resources and everything, and then passing that information on to their team and their legal team to then follow up with.
And I think DES would give you a list as well.
Okay.
I would be surprised if they didn't, but,
Perfect.
Excellent. Anything else on that?
we're just providing it as a information, not as a recommendation.
Right,
as to
yeah.
what you use.
Otherwise-
Because you may want to shop around because the prices can be.
Well, there's it's a professional
Yeah, yeah.
organization, so it's whoever lists on their
Yeah.
site, so.
Just the correct starting point to make sure we're going through all the proper channels to follow what we're trying to do out there.
Excellent.
So I think procedurally, we don't really you can continue to provide us with this kind of information, which is really appreciated. But then, when you go to get your permits from DES, it's gonna come back to us for our comments at that time. But a lot of what you're saying here, I think, is, you know, if that's what you're moving forward with, would be the kinds of stuff that we probably end up recommending,
Yeah.
because they're best management practices.
Yeah, it seems beneficial to all, and
Yeah.
keeping the environment in mind with everything we do too.
And by going off stream is normally looked pretty favorably by DES.
Yeah, that's a
Pretty
lot of what we
well,
have. We do have one sediment filtration pond out there at the golf course that helps, that actually we won't have to touch, so that's good.
And as you know, with, you know, the changes in the climate, where you get drought and all of a sudden you get these huge bolts of water, you know, designing for not the past but the future is probably a wise idea. But
Yeah, especially what we have out there.
I'm gonna say, I sense you know that already.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Anything else on that? No?
Only that it's so hard. I spend so much time on this in the winter, but I've like never walked out here in the summer. And it's like really hard to figure out where things are. I'm like, oh, that's a fairway. I have no idea what that is.
You don't wanna go over and see all of
I'd
them.
be like, what's a fairway?
Yeah, it's like I know all the ski trails, but like,
About a time.
Here you go.
Yeah, the big pond that's by the river.
The
That's-
one over,
Yeah, and that's the thing, some of the trails on the course don't have their specific ski trail names, and it's funny, just in discussions with Ellen, everything I refer to in the golf course is by the holes of the golf course, and everything she's referring to are the ski trails, and for 2 different pages, and just you say, over there by that thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they'd be, I think, pretty interested in pairing up with you on that to get off river for all.
Exactly, there's been conversations with Ellen, and then there'll be conversations with the future, the staff and everything that's gonna be there.
Yeah.
So, mutual interest, and there have been conversations started with the new ownership of those
Yeah.
interests.
But
Excellent.
I was gonna say, I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. Cheers.
and thanks for your patience.
Yeah, of course. Good learning process there. Have a good night.
You too.
Looks like we're finding
So,
this.
the last thing as I was digging through the file cabinet, I found an envelope with 2 CD-ROMs on it
Good.
that has all of this data, and
This was actually on the shelf up there.
I think Brian put it there
Okay.
the other day. Yeah, so for our resource inventory, there was, the Land Trust had commissioned a resource inventory that covers, and I was gonna forward this to everyone, but I just did not get around to that, but
If you can, because I couldn't find it on the website. Did you get it on the website?
this was on the CD-ROM, so, and it has all of these maps.
When did they do that?
2011.
2011.
I think Larry Garland did a lot of
He
that.
did actually, so.
Alright,
So I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah.
I remember that.
The stuff that'll need to be updated is the, like the wildlife plan is updated periodically. I suspect some of that info, but that's all available on Granite.
All right, if there's,
Don't put your coats on. Now I'm gonna come in right at the end.
I've got a lot of things to say. I've been waiting till right now.
No, I was just gonna say, the planning board is this year hopefully gonna upgrade the master plan. And as we have input from here, let me know, because it's a great place, even as Eric was saying, give me, parameters of, okay, well, maybe we can come up with something. It can't be too specific just for him, but maybe something across the board. We can find the words, and, it's gonna take at least the rest of the year to do it, so there's no rush, but keep it in mind that it's a great document, because then somebody can't come in and say, oh, you're being arbitrary, making me adhere to this. No, because you've passed something that he doesn't like. It's in the master plan. It's part of the planning for the town. So it has actual legal weight.
And I would just add on to what you're saying, is your zoning regulations should match the intention of the master plan.
So anyway,
Yeah.
there it is. I didn't keep it too long.
All right, well, our next meeting is going to be April 6th. And is there a motion to adjourn?
I second.
Well, you're gonna make the motion.
Jeff,
I'm gonna make the motion. Adjourn.
all right.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in
Like
favor?
my wife wishes.
Aye.
Go tonight.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Then I will,
Let me